He wrote, in a few weeks, Pope Francis will visit our fair land, a fitting pivot from the summer of Trump, closing out a glutinous episode of narcissism, rudeness, frivolity, and xenophobia. For all that the orangutan-haired vulgarian has done to elevate the worst human traits a public figure can have, Francis is the anti-Trump. Last week, I showed you Donald Trump telling an Iowa crowd that his favorite book was the Bible, but as this clip shows, liturgical knowledge doesn't seem to run very deep.
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that you like?
No, I don't want to do that.
Are you an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's just an incredible, the whole Bible is an incredible, I joke very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time. But I just think the Bible is just something very special.
To discuss this and other aspects of a papal visit, which will include the first time a pope has ever addressed Congress, I've invited a journalist with keen insight. Robert Draper wrote the terrific story in the September National Geographic magazine titled, Will the Pope Change the Vatican, or Will the Vatican Change the Pope? And he wrote the essays in the new picture book, Pope Francis and the New Vatican, and he joins me now from Houston. Robert, you wrote that the Pope is an acute social observer. Surely he knows he's arriving in the thick of a presidential campaign where immigration is dominating the debate thus far. How do you think he'll react?
Well, yeah, Michael, when the Vatican scheduled this trip for Pope Francis several months ago, I don't think that Donald Trump was on their radar, but he certainly is on Pope Francis's radar now. And effectively, I think he's going to be the audience of the speech that Pope Francis gives, as you mentioned, to the Joint Congress on September the 24th. Because for Pope Francis, inequality, both racial as well as economic, has been a prominent issue. I mean, one of the first things that he did when he became Pope was to visit the island of Lampedusa, which is just off of the coast of Sardinia, and where a lot of Libyan refugees had arrived by boat. And so the message he wanted to send from the very outset was one of outreach, was one of tolerance. And so the rhetoric of Donald Trump that's contrary to that, I think, is something he's going to directly address.
Do you expect that, as you put it, the rhetoric of Donald Trump is on his radar screen? I mean, is the Pope politically savvy?
Yes, he is. I mean, he's not savvy in the sense that he follows the horse race per se, but he reads newspapers. He reads like 3 or 4 every morning. He himself is not a social media person. I hope this doesn't disappoint his millions of followers, but he isn't the one doing the tweeting on the @Pontifex Twitter handle. But he does really follow assiduously politics. He understands the dynamics at play. He certainly understands that he's arriving at sort of the on-ramp of the presidential contest, and I think that his comments to the Congress are going to reflect that.
You wrote this, if I could put it up on the screen, I circled this in National Geographic. He is, the media would have it, a reformer, a radical, a revolutionary, and he is also none of these things. What does that mean, Robert?
Well, it means that, on the one hand, I'm not convinced that he's going to change doctrine. You know, I don't know that he is going to, for example, toss out the notion that priests must be celibate. I don't know that he's going to allow women, the ordination of women into the priesthood. What he has done, though, that's very radical is to change the tonality of the Catholic Church, which for so long has been focused on sin, has put sin at the center of the discussion, rather than man's suffering and the need for love. And I think that in doing that, and in encouraging encouraging all Catholics to reach out to the periphery, not simply to be this insular church that has a list of do's and don'ts, but to go out to the people who are alienated, is frankly a radical concept, if however one that has been preached since Jesus Christ.
Here's an indication from my hometown, I hope you can see that, in Philadelphia, of just how big the papal visit is in Philadelphia and, of course, Washington, D.C. and New York City. My question is, as you look at his public events over 6 days, and I'll put part of the calendar up on the screen, what are you circling for political significance? Is it the meeting with the president? Is it the speech to the joint session of Congress? Is it the open-air mass in Philly? For political purposes, where should we be paying attention?
I think at 9:20 Eastern Time on the morning of September the 24th, he should be paying very close attention to the speech he gives to Congress. By the way, we should note that, though, the former Jorge Mario Bergoglio is a Latin American, that he was born and raised in Buenos Aires, that in fact this is his first trip to the United States of America. He's never been here before. But it happens, Michael, that when he gives these kinds of speeches, he makes the most of them. He did when he was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires and railed out against government corruption when President Kirchner was sitting in the audience. He's going to do the same thing at this speech. I mean, I think that it's very likely he'll talk about income inequality. He's probably going to talk about climate change as well, since that's a subject that's been near and dear to him since he witnessed the destruction of the Amazon rainforest when he was Archbishop. But I think now as well, he is certainly going to be talking about immigration and the need for tolerance and the need to basically cast aside the sort of hateful rhetoric.
That's why I say, Robert, I think that he will set the tone for the fall portion of this campaign. A final question, if I might, for you. You report in National Geographic that within 2 years of his papacy, he's already appointed 39 cardinals. And when I read that, I said, it sounds as if it's a role akin to a president and the Supreme Court of the United States. In other words, is his imprint going to be left on the Vatican for long after he's no longer the Pope?
That's clearly his intention, Michael. I mean, he's already said that his papacy is not likely to be a long one, that he wants to follow the precedent set by Pope Benedict and retire within a few years or so. But it's clear that he does not want the progress that the Catholic Church has made under his papacy to be rolled back. And so he has essentially stacked the deck, as it were, by appointing cardinals who are much more, I mean, that frankly are not old school, not as insidery as the cardinals we've seen that have peopled the Vatican in the past. So no, I think that whoever his successor will be picked in a conclave by these cardinals who clearly, who clearly embrace the point of view that he does, that the Catholic Church has got to be more open.
The National Geographic piece is terrific. Congratulations, Robert Draper, and thanks for being here.